So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for finding some time from your busy schedules to join us here today. We have a really exciting presentation entitled Architecting Mobile Solutions Using Microsoft Azure and Akana, and we're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about how you can realize mobile solutions that utilize APIs, utilize the Microsoft Azure Cloud, and utilize Akana's API management features in order to roll out a very high-quality mobile solution that allows you to build very high-quality mobile apps that access enterprise data and data in the cloud. My name is Simon Barrere, Director of Technology here at Akana, based out of Los Angeles, which is our headquarters. And I'll be speaking with you for the rest of this presentation, laying out these very exciting ideas and showing you just how you can market these very exciting mobile solutions. Okay, so with that, why don't we dive in? And in terms of agenda, pretty simple. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Akana, just to give you a level set about who we are. And then I want to talk about give a bit of an overview of a mobile platform project that we worked with a customer on, where we will lay out all of the ideas and the requirements of a mobile platform. Then we'll dive into an architecture review where we'll talk a little bit about what that target architecture looked like and how the different components came together, from Microsoft Azure to Akana's components to some cloud partners and so on. And then we will close with patterns and best practices, talk a little bit about what was important in terms of the implementation of this solution and some things that you guys should be thinking about as you start coming out with mobile platforms for your own business requirements moving forward. All right, so a lot of great content, straightforward agenda. Why don't we dive in? So in terms of Akana, Akana is an enterprise software company, again, based out of Los Angeles with offices around the United States and actually around the world. We are a Microsoft Gold Certified Partner, managed partner, high potential ISV with a presence at Microsoft's technology centers worldwide. So we have a great partnership with Microsoft and are always looking for opportunities to add value to the Microsoft platform through API management, SOA management technology. We offer a unified SOA and API platform. It's a platform for both SOA and API. So whether you're trying to harness your on-premise systems and clean them up and make them more easy to access and more streamlined, Akana can absolutely help with that. But if you're also interested in APIs, the cloud, and exposing your on-prem data as REST-based services and other types of APIs, we also help with that. So it's a very unified solution that can help you with all aspects of your SOA and API requirements. One of the things that's special about Akana is that we have solutions that are built from the ground up for the Microsoft platform. So we code in the very same languages that you guys code in, that Microsoft engineers code in. We work on the very same Microsoft platform that you guys work on, Windows Server and .NET Framework, IIS, WCF, and so on. And we extend that into the Azure Cloud, working with technologies within Microsoft Azure like Service Bus, Relay, and so on. So we have very exciting technology that's targeted directly for the Microsoft platform, and you'll learn a little bit about that in the rest of the presentation as we go through the architecture, and you can see how we are able to leverage some of our native functionality and capabilities in pursuit of a mobile API platform. We also offer full lifecycle management. This is a very key area of functionality that Akana offers. Again, very unique functionality. We have tools and products and solutions that allow you to define and drive a full service lifecycle across all of your SOA services and API services. Those could be APIs in the cloud, APIs on-prem. We help you to define what APIs are necessary, what the design of those APIs should look like, how they should be developed, and how they should be deployed and shared out to the base of consumers, app developers, that need to make use of it. So our full lifecycle management is a huge part of our value proposition and something very exciting that we offer that is unique in the industry. Finally, we have integrated runtime support, so we can run our APIs on the Microsoft platform. We have support for other platforms as well, and it's fully integrated, so you don't have to worry about switching from one technology to another as you go from defining and designing your APIs to actually going and running them on a runtime platform. Our solutions are fully integrated, so you never miss a beat as you move through your service lifecycle. So that gives you an idea about Akana. Again, a lot of exciting functionality, a lot of great partnership with Microsoft, and a lot of opportunities for us to work with you to help you in your Microsoft environments to realize their true potential, whether you're working with Microsoft on-prem or you're working with Microsoft in the Azure cloud. Okay? Hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about Akana. And in terms of our product set, I want to quickly cover the different capabilities that we offer and the product that we bring to bear to offer those capabilities. On this slide, you can see a stack of capabilities starting at the bottom with Lifecycle Management. I talked about that just a moment ago. Our Lifecycle Manager product is our key offering that offers Lifecycle Management across your API service lifecycle. So Lifecycle Manager will allow you to do a huge amount of very powerful Lifecycle Management features. Moving up from there, we have Gateway Services and Service Integration. We offer that through our API Gateway capability. That includes both the ability to define new APIs and also the ability to run them. So we offer very powerful gateway capabilities, including capabilities native to the Microsoft platform that will allow you to both define and run your APIs and also deal with important topics like orchestration, security policy, integration, transformation, all the important enterprise-level integration and other types of services that are important in order that you can adapt your enterprise data to all of the needs that people have on that data. Could be needs in the cloud, could be needs of trading partners, needs of on-prem applications, whatever it may be. We're going to help you to connect up with all of your enterprise data without having to refactor your infrastructure and without having to write all sorts of new code or new software in order to make that happen. That's all available out of the box. Finally, at the top, we have analytics and developer engagement. We offer that through our Community Manager product. Community Manager gives you a developer portal out of box. The developer portal allows you to engage with developers, app developers out in the cloud as an example, also trading partners and developers on-prem. All of these folks have a place to go to with Community Manager in the picture where they can browse for APIs, they can request access to APIs, they can collaborate and communicate with the API developers who created those APIs, and they can engage with a wide variety of other capabilities that are very important in terms of building a community, app developers and API developers who want to come together to partner to create those next generation mobile apps that are so important for the future of your business. And finally, the top piece in green, analytics is equally important. Analytics allows you to understand the value and the benefits that your APIs are providing to the community and allow you to make plans for the future to make sure that you're properly investing in APIs. We all know that APIs are a hugely valuable future-looking technology, but it's important that we utilize them correctly. If we don't, they may not hit the mark. And all the time and energy invested in making APIs available to a developer community may be lost if you're not properly measuring and making key decisions based upon past history of API usage in order to ensure that you're getting the maximum value out of APIs. So that kind of gives you an idea. It's a very full stack, very rich set of features, and when you bring those all together, you have a one-stop shop for end-to-end API management across the entire lifecycle, including and especially the runtime and the community management aspects of your APIs. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of Akana's unified SOA and API platform. Moving on from there, why don't we dive into the heart of the matter and talk a little bit about this mobile platform project and what it was all about. It was a mobile initiative for a major U.S. retail grocery chain, so you can imagine what their requirements are. They want to be able to communicate and interact with their customers who are shoppers like you and I, who want to learn about things like what's going on at the local stores, what's on sale, what are coupons, what's my status with the loyalty program, what's my status with the fuel discount program, and so on. So typical needs of a large grocery retailer. So the goal was to build a mobile platform that can create these new digital customer relationships. So the customer realized that, in all areas of retail, being able to increase your marketing channels to your customers, improve their experiences, help them save money, and so on, were critical to future competitiveness. And those customers want to be able to access this relationship over mobile devices like iPhone and Android. So being able to have a mobile platform that allows them to rapidly roll out mobile apps that can offer all these great new experiences was a critical strategic move for the company, for the customer, in order to meet these goals and remain competitive and delight their customers. In terms of business objectives, you can imagine increased store sales through increased loyalty, communication, and positive digital experiences. And I should add that, this is not a paradigm that's unique to this customer or even unique to the retail industry. This is something that is becoming a rapidly important item across all industries, right? So this need to increase your marketing channels, increase your interaction channels with your end users is hugely important across all industries. More and more customers are growing accustomed to very rich experiences with the businesses that they do business with. They want access to information up to the finger, up to the minute. They don't want to have to dive through a lot of stuff. They want personalized experiences, and they want to have a great digital relationship with the businesses that they work with. So even though this was very specific to a particular retail customer, this is pretty common. I think you would agree across all industries, so it's a very important goal no matter what type of industry you are in today. In terms of technical goals, so a lot of key things. First item on the list is rich partner application and on-premise integration. So the customer did have a large number of partners and also had a large on-premise set of services and data that was very important that they continued to work with moving forward. Also support for mobile standards. So obviously this was a mobile initiative. So being able to support all the most recent mobile standards, things like JSON, REST, OAuth, and various aspects of HTTP, those were all very key for the customer. Also support for heterogeneous technology, both Microsoft, IBM, and cloud. And that's something that actually I should mention about Akana. Akana is also really good and unique at heterogeneous solutions. So as I mentioned, we offer very nice solutions for the Microsoft platform, but we also offer solutions for other platforms. So if you are in an environment where you're working with a lot of different technology, Akana has a great solution that allows you to still have a single unified solution, even though that solution is being used within a lot of different environments like Microsoft and IBM. In particular, Microsoft was selected as the cloud provider, so Microsoft Azure, and IBM had an existing presence on-prem in terms of existing enterprise data. Okay, so heterogeneous technology was key. Also, strong service management capabilities, so that was an important goal. So going beyond just the ability to, by hook or by crook, make data available, it was important that there were patterns and practices in place and strong management capabilities to ensure that services could be rolled out very quickly and can be used in a variety of different scenarios, interconnect with on-premise systems, interconnect with mobile devices, and with partners. So service management and lifecycle management and all those key areas are very important for the solution. Finally, rapid, cost-effective time to value. So like most mobile programs, time is of the essence. Businesses just don't have time to wait and see about digital and about mobile. They see their competitors rolling out cooler and cooler mobile solutions. So it's become very important that time to value is at the top of the list. Cannot afford to wait 6 months or a year or longer in order to roll things out. Things need to move quickly, on the order of months. All right, so some really key goals. Let's talk a little bit about Microsoft Azure and Akana. So some of the key benefits that the Microsoft Akana partnership bring to bear on the solution include cloud-based integration for agility and cost effectiveness. So Azure gives some great capabilities here in terms of the ability to roll out cloud-based solutions and how those integrate with a wide variety of different systems. So that was a very key aspect. Point two, rich vendor product strategy and feature set to support customer roadmap. So the need for a very vibrant roadmap and product strategy that continues to anticipate all the needs of mobile, all the needs of APIs, all the needs of cloud and cloud integration. Clearly, both Microsoft Azure and Akana offer this kind of very forward-looking roadmap and product strategy, so that's a very key aspect that the partnership offers. Also, heterogeneous technology support, kind of raised that earlier, the ability for Akana to work in a lot of different technology environments, and Microsoft Azure's growing acceptance of a lot of different technologies proved to be key as well. And finally, rich service management features That includes things like security, mediation, monitoring and metrics, orchestration, and service catalog. We'll get into a little bit more of that a little bit later. But the ability to go beyond just your basic services or your basic, rollout of components and into very rich service management that allows you to very easily gain access to rich security, rich mediation, in-depth monitoring and metrics, orchestration capabilities, and a rich service catalog. Those are all very important features, especially when you think about the need to scale and roll out a large number of APIs quickly. These management features become very, very key. So a lot of nice benefits that we were able to offer, and we're very happy to offer. All right, so it kind of gives you an idea about some of the requirements, some of the things that were important, some of the value propositions of both Microsoft and Akana. Why don't we now dive into the actual architecture and talk about what was actually rolled out. So you can see here a very high-level view of what that architecture looks like. At the top of the stack, we have obviously the mobile devices. That could be Android or iOS-based devices. And those mobile devices is essentially what the end customer is interacting with, and customers logging in and using those apps in order to do things like check local store details or digital coupons or fuel rewards and so on. So that's kind of the starting point for the architecture. And those mobile apps need to interconnect with an initial component that can help drive the rest of the transaction, right? So you can imagine the mobile device needs to go somewhere in order to look up things like what are my current points in my reward system. Well, that place is the API Gateway. API Gateway is a term that we use and is used in the industry to define a component, a runtime component that can host APIs and that can offer a very rich set of value-added features on top of APIs to help make those APIs very rich. I'm talking about things like security, monitoring, metrics, rate limiting, enterprise integration, security, a lot of very important aspects. So that API Gateway became the prime architectural component to receive the initial transaction and figure out the right thing to do with it. And because the API Gateway offers such rich support for lots of different primitives, essentially it's your imagination that dictates what the API Gateway does next with the transaction. And you can see on this architecture diagram that the API Gateway actually does a lot of interaction. So one of the things it interacts with on the right are partners. So the solution entailed a wide variety of different cloud-based partners who offered a variety of different services and solutions. The API Gateway was able to interconnect with those partners in order to get the job done in terms of what role those partners provided in the total solution. Also to the left, you have Azure Services, which the API Gateway needs to be able to interact with in order to gain valuable value-added services that Azure provides. Below that, you have the key business logic section, which is where some of the most important processing occurs in terms of being able to satisfy the mobile transaction. Again, things like looking up store details or being able to provide rewards data about my particular account. That business logic was running in Azure, which was a very innovative and nice solution. Normally you think about business logic as running on-prem, but in this case it ran in the Azure cloud. We'll get into some more details about what that business logic looked like, but it was a very novel and nice part of the architecture to have that business logic running in Azure. Finally, the last piece is the on-prem component. As I mentioned earlier, there was a strong IBM component that contained a lot of very critical data. So the on-prem component involved the ability to expose all that important on-prem data out to the cloud, typically to be made accessible to the business logic in order to satisfy the needs of the business logic and the tiers above it. Okay? So that kind of gives you an idea of the total architecture. Very nice, very clean architecture, despite the fact that it's a sophisticated architecture that is solving a lot of challenges, but still very, very nicely laid out. So why don't we start diving in and start looking at first a typical flow, and then we're going to take each component and do a deeper dive on what that component is all about. So in terms of data flow, kind of went through this earlier, but let me make it more explicit. The mobile device first point of contact is the API Gateway in red, and the mobile device will use REST and JSON in that communication, REST, JSON, HTTP, OAuth, and so on. Once that interconnection is made, the API Gateway will do the proper security, and then will start the branching of the transaction to a number of different components. That includes point number 2 there, which is interaction with Azure Services, making use of things like Azure Table Storage in order to store information and so on. Also, point 3 is the interaction with the partners in order to gain value add from the partner standpoint. Then, when those two pieces are satisfied, the transaction is forwarded to the business logic. That's point 4. And the business logic is doing all that important stuff about satisfying the needs of the transaction. And again, that business logic might interoperate with the partners in point 6 and with the Azure services in point 5. So, those services might be integrated via business logic or via API Gateway, depending upon which logic that was. And finally, we have point 7, which is the integration between the business logic and the on-prem data. And that's where all the important enterprise data is retrieved and reformulated and then responded back all the way back to the mobile device, where finally the shopper gets the result of the transaction and happily sees that result. Okay? So pretty straightforward data flow. So why don't we now go to each component and talk a little bit more about what those components were all about. We'll do a bit of a bottom-up approach, and we'll start with the components that had the least dependencies and move towards the components that had the most dependencies. So we'll start at the bottom, which is the on-prem component. And if we blow up the on-prem component, we see that there were 4 components there. We have the API Gateway, and you'll notice we had the API Gateway higher up as well. We actually deployed the API Gateway both on-prem and in the cloud. So essentially everywhere that you needed to take a rich backend and expose it as APIs, you put an API Gateway. And to be clear, this is the Akana API Gateway running here. It could be an API Gateway realized through other solutions, but in this case it was through Akana. But essentially the same API Gateway solution that's running in the cloud is also running in on-prem. And that API Gateway is running in the DMZ, and it's interconnecting with IBM-based systems and other backend data in order to expose that data out to the cloud. So very critical aspect of the total solution. Very nice to see that the API Gateway can interoperate with IBM-based systems, and hugely valuable in terms of the ability for that gateway to run in the DMZ and deal with things like security and expose that out to the Azure cloud. Okay, so that's the on-premise portion. Moving up from there, we're now back in the cloud tier, and we'll start off with the partners. These are the guys who are adding all sorts of value to the transaction. You can kind of see some of the partner capabilities on the right there. It's things like content management. It's things like loyalty programs, things like fuel rewards, things like email support, and things like digital coupons. So you can see partners are adding quite a bit of value to the total transaction chain, and it's a very rich ecosystem where integration was done through REST, which is a very nice solution because it means that things like the API Gateway and the business logic running in the cloud can both make use of simple primitives in order to integrate with those components. The fact that they were cloud-based was a big win for the customer because it means that the integration can be rapid and time to value can quicken because all of these components are available from day one. It's only a matter about taking your API Gateway or your business logic and doing some simple integration and gaining all the value that those partners offer in terms of all those different functions you see on the right side there. And those functions were accessed both through orchestration and through business logic. That's why the arrows on the earlier slide showed both. So it wasn't that only the API Gateway accessed it. It was all about which component needed access to those partner capabilities. Okay? Definitely a very, very key part of the architecture and a very key part of the value that the customer is able to gain through integration with these cloud-based partners. Okay? All right, moving on to the Azure services. So this is the left-hand side of the cloud diagram. So we had a variety of pretty important Azure services, and if you're familiar with Azure, you kind of know that these are some of the core services that Azure offers that a lot of people look forward to working with. So kind of going from top to bottom, Azure VMs were a key part of the solution, so a lot of the key components and technology running in Azure were running on Azure VMs. Also, Azure AD was utilized for security, both a typical on-prem based Azure AD installation, but also the core Azure AD cloud-based solution were both utilized for security. So very nice to be able to access a Azure security system as part of your solution. Also, table storage being used to look up important data, typically end-user related data. So if you want to look up entitlements or other information about a user, table storage is a great place to do that. Also Azure Cache for performance, so the ability to utilize Azure Cache to improve the performance of the mobile transactions is key. And finally, worker roles. Worker roles were a very cool part of the solution. If you're not familiar with worker roles, they allow you to take a component and auto-deploy and auto-scale that component to the Azure cloud. You can use Visual Studio in order to define those components, and then you can click a couple of buttons, and those components automatically get deployed to Azure. So worker roles were actually very key for the business logic side of the affair, and it became a very nice win because it made the deployment and the running of the business logic that much easier. Okay? So a lot of very key, a lot of very cool services in Azure were leveraged. Very nice to see that the customer was able to gain so much value from Azure. Azure definitely has a lot to offer and will continue to bring a lot to the table in terms of ease of development. And again, you should think of all of these as not only being able to provide a lot of key functionality, but also to reduce time to market and also make it more cost-effective and make it more scalable in terms of the total solution. So, this is the key argument for public cloud. This is the ability to leverage such a wide array of very powerful services, but have it at your fingertips and be able to utilize them so quickly. Okay? So those are the Azure services. And next up, we have the business logic. Okay, so again, we're moving from bottom to top. Now, business logic wants to make use of both the partner, the Azure services, and the on-prem. So it's a key component that essentially aggregates a lot of very key functionality. You can see some of the key components of business logic. So worker roles, as I mentioned earlier, were utilized in order to make the business logic very easy to deploy and run and auto-scale. NetTCP was used as a core WCF paradigm to make integration with the tier above it, the API Gateway, high performant and very easy to roll out. Partner integration, we talked about the ability to integrate with these different partners for their key capabilities. Windows security was also a key part of the solution. I mentioned earlier that Active Directory was deployed as an on-premise service as opposed to Azure AD. Windows security played a key role in securing the net. You had role-based access control, you had authentication, you had authorization, you had privacy, all the key foundational security primitives that are needed for communication across the cloud were offered through Windows security. On-premise integration we talked about earlier, and we had the API Gateway running on-prem to make that integration very powerful. And then, of course, all the business logic. So that's business logic that's written on the .NET framework. Developers, using core Microsoft tools and paradigms in order to come out with that business logic. Overall, the business logic was a real win. It's a very sophisticated platform. It has great integration with the rest of the other components, and it was able to satisfy most of the needs of business logic, but utilizing all of the public cloud benefits of Microsoft Azure. So really big win, really nice solution for rolling out business logic in the cloud. Okay. Moving on from there, API Gateway, so we're almost at the top there. And again, we talked about the API Gateway earlier. This is a much more sophisticated implementation of the API Gateway because the API Gateway on-prem was really about exposing some on-prem data. But this API Gateway was all about a wide variety of important functions. You can see some of them here. Things like orchestration, security, mediation, transformation, monitoring, and metrics. These are all capabilities that allow the API Gateway to receive the initial transaction from the mobile device, but go off and do a lot of sophisticated things. So you can imagine the API Gateway first starting off by doing some security, then it will go through an orchestration where it makes some call-outs to Azure Services, then makes some call-outs to partner components. When it does that, it will do some level of mediation to take the incoming message and extract different aspects of it. Transformation is also used for that purpose. So, for example, if you're going from JSON to JSON, you need to be able to reconstruct a new JSON document based on the old. But you may be going from JSON to XML, or you may be going from one form of HTTP to another. So a lot of different possibilities there in terms of mediation. Monitoring and metrics are very key in order that, from a DevOps standpoint, the customer is able to gain a lot of visibility into what was going on inside the API Gateway. And of course, security is very, very key. So being able to secure the transaction up front without requiring all the other components to do the same, that's a big deal as part of the overall solution. Okay, so API Gateway definitely a very key component to the overall solution. I should also mention that with the API Gateway, that's what also opens the door up for all of the management capabilities that Akana offers in terms of lifecycle management and being able to have a single point of contact to view all of your APIs and services and control them. via policy-driven behavior, and all the other management capabilities that Akana brings to bear. Those are all now made available because the APIs are running in the API Gateway. So definitely a very key part of the solution. All right, moving on from there, last tier is the mobile tier. And again, mobile tier has a pretty simple interface into the rest of the solution, utilizing REST, JSON, and OAuth. It's able to make simple calls to the API Gateway, and that kicks off the rest of the transaction. So this is a very big win for the mobile side of the house, because the mobile app developers do not want to get bogged down in the larger picture. That larger picture is just too complex. So understanding things like on-prem data, understanding things like security, understanding things like cloud partner services and Azure services, that is all far too complex for the mobile layer to get involved with. So the API Gateway makes it very easy to expose a very simple REST, JSON, OAuth interface that is the only interface that the mobile app developers need to worry about to get their job done. That's a very big win, and that's a big recommendation moving forward. When you have something like an API Gateway, you can reduce the complexity of the mobile tier and let those mobile apps and mobile app developers concentrate on what they're really good at, which is a great experience for the end user. Okay? So that's kind of the tier all the way to the top, and that kind of sums up and rounds out the full picture in terms of all the different pieces. On this slide here, you can now see the full architecture with all the different aspects put in place. So you can see, again, the sheer number of different components that are brought together. But again, the good news here is that there's not a lot of complex software development required in order to make all this happen. Most of the work in terms of making this entire picture happen inside the API Gateway or inside the business logic. And so between these two components, they're able to tie together all these disparate components into a single simple whole that can be consumed by the mobile tier, by the iPhone, iOS, Android apps that are running out there and being used by the customers. So this is a really big win. The ability to have such a nice, sophisticated architecture with so many different features and functions, but the ability to roll them out very quickly without too much software development and hardcore infrastructure requirements is a very big win, a very nice win, and a win that you should be looking forward to in the future in terms of you adopting these kinds of patterns to make sure that you gain similar benefits moving forward. Okay? So that kind of rounds out the picture of the architecture. What I want to do now is switch gears a little bit and talk about some patterns and best practices. These are some things to think about in terms of that total picture and what you should be thinking about as you start designing an architecture that follows along this kind of a pattern. So it's kind of just a bulleted list I'll go through from top to bottom. So the top bullet point there, clearly define interfaces and schemas at all tiers. That includes both data and service. This is pretty important. As you saw on the last slide, there are a lot of interfaces, and those interfaces all use a lot of different schemas. So you make sure you want to have all of your different tiers very clear about what interfaces and schemas they will require. This also helps with coordination. So it's not just a technical concern. It helps with coordination because a lot of different groups come together to make a solution like this work. You have mobile app developers, you have cloud providers, you have on-prem data owners. All these folks need to come together in a rapid time frame, so it's critical that they all define their interfaces and schemas clearly so that they can all work together very, very smoothly. Okay? Second bullet point, ensure appropriate security over entire life of transaction. So again, you have a lot of different tiers here, and you want to make sure this is a very secure solution. You want to make sure that the mobile app communicates appropriately with the API Gateway. API Gateway communicates appropriately with cloud services and with the business logic, and so forth and so on. So you want to make sure you have the right level of security. In today's age, you can never be too careful. It doesn't mean, by the way, that the security needs to be the same across the board. So for example, when the API Gateway communicates with the business logic, that's a different level of security. As you mentioned earlier, that's a native Windows security approach using Active Directory. That's a much better solution for communicating between the API Gateway and the business logic than between, let's say, the mobile app and the API Gateway. It would make no sense to have the mobile app communicate with the API Gateway using Windows security. So you want to choose the appropriate security. You want to make sure it makes sense from a technical standpoint. You want to make sure it makes sense from a level of hardness standpoint. Okay? Next item up for bid is anticipate mediation at all tier entries and exits. This is kind of similar to the first bullet point on interfaces and schemas, but you want to make sure that you're using the right technology and the right integration at all tiers. For example, you should not suppose that all of the tiers utilize REST and JSON. Once again, communication between the API Gateway and the business tier was done using NetTCP and SOAP. That made the most sense between those two tiers because they were very intimate with each other and because that was the highest performant, easiest to integrate methodology to use between those two tiers. So make sure that you can do mediation. And in this case, the API Gateway did do mediation. It took the JSON messages and it mediated it to SOAP, NetTCP, XML-based messages when it was communicating downstream. Okay? Last piece, use the right technology to fit the needs of each tier. Again, similar to the second to last bullet point and the first bullet point, you just want to make sure that you're not forcing any tier to use a particular technology that's not natural for it. So when you're working with IBM systems on-prem, that might be one type of technology. When you're working with cloud providers, that might be another. When you're working with Azure, that might be another. And when you're working with mobile, that might be another. Make sure you have the right flexibility in place so that the right technology is utilized to fit the needs of that tier. Okay? A couple of more. Top of this slide, clearly delineate environments. So this is pretty key. You do want to make sure that you're not just slapping together all these different components and then kind of just running it. You want to make sure you have clear environments like dev, QA, and prod, where you can start on a early environment and then progress all the way up to a production environment. Okay. Another one that's really important is ensuring that all tiers support target service levels and goals. So this is a weakest link problem. And there are a lot of different things you need to think about on each tier. It includes latency, throughput, uptime, peak load, and scalability. If you think about it, you might have a kick-ass API gateway that has all of these pieces in place, but when it comes to just one of your cloud providers, let's say it's a rewards program provider, let's say they offer very poor latency, and they can scale, but it takes a second and a half for them to return something. That's not going to bode very well for the overall solution. Or imagine that you have very nice uptime across the board because you have clustering and load balancing and auto-scaling in all of your components except for one. That one component has terrible uptime and it's always failing. Once again, that doesn't bode well. You're going to have terrible responsiveness to your end users. You're going to have lots of outages. So you just want to make sure that you have the same level of service across all of your different tiers. It doesn't make sense to optimize one tier only to find out that some other tiers are very poor in terms of their ability to do these different kinds of service levels. Okay? And that's pretty much it. So that gives you an idea of both the architecture and of some thoughts on things to think about. So overall, this hopefully is a very exciting and informative architecture and one that brings ideas to your mind in terms of what you can start rolling out in your environment. If you guys are running on the Azure cloud, that's an even bigger win. Again, Akana's solutions are built from the ground up on the Microsoft platform, anticipating the needs of both on-prem Microsoft users and Azure cloud users. We talked about a variety of those in the last couple of slides, things like Windows security, things like NetTCP, things like Active Directory. Those are all benefits of working on the Microsoft platform. Having a partner like Akana that can work with those solutions natively is definitely a key win. But even if you're working on other platforms outside of Microsoft Azure, you have a lot of wins ahead of you as well. Akana supports a very large number of different platforms, most especially IBM and Microsoft, and we have our own native solutions as well. So however you're rolling out your solutions, if you're thinking about mobile platforms, if you're thinking about utilizing the benefits of public cloud and integrating with private cloud and dealing with important concepts like security and orchestration and mediation and integration across a lot of different tiers, then definitely this kind of a solution is the right solution for you, and we'd love to partner with you and help you understand how you can roll out that kind of a solution very quickly, very cost effectively, and with a huge amount of power within all the different tiers that make up the solution. Okay? So that's pretty much it. That's what I wanted to cover and go over. Let's not end the conversation here. If you have further thoughts or questions, please do visit us at akana.com/Microsoft. We have a lot of great content that we can share with you, white papers and webinars and data sheets and other kinds of information that can give you a lot more detail than what I've covered on today's call. Of course, please do visit the rest of akana.com, where you can learn about our offerings across the board. We have a lot of exciting functionality in all the different areas we've been talking about, whether it's cloud integration, or it's security, or it's policy-driven behavior, or it's on-prem SOA, lifecycle management. We are a one-stop shop for all of your needs from an API and SOA management standpoint. Okay? So please do visit us, do reach out, do contact us, and let's continue this great conversation and work together to help you roll out very powerful mobile-based solutions. So with that, again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate taking time out from your busy schedules. Hope you guys found this very valuable, very enlightening, gave you a lot of ideas about how you can tackle some of your toughest challenges in the mobile space moving forward. Again, please do visit us at akana.com, and we'll be speaking soon. Thanks so much for your time.